You what?
Okay,
Here, there you go.
welcome to the meeting, Town of New Paltz Planning Board, April 7th, 2014 meeting. First up on the agenda is review and approval of minutes. We've had amended minutes for March 24th, 2014. I have a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Hey, Tim and Peter, any discussions on them? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain, because I'm not here, wasn't here.
Okay.
I also abstain because I'm only a partial.
You were here.
We got
No,
four.
you're not partial.
I could be a half.
Okay. Next up on our agenda is public comment. This is generally areas of people wish to bring up. Other than any public hearings, there aren't any public hearings tonight. Is anybody wishing to make a public comment?
Global project, sir.
We'll be discussing that as one of the applications.
If you don't comment afterwards,
Probably be better to make your comment now rather than, because once we go in administrative detail, it's basically a board discussion.
well, I like to say, my name's Dean Tambori. I'm with Laborers Local 17. I think that the Wilmerite, we've been watching it. I represent the field rep for the laborers in this area. And Wilmerite, the board, I think you both did a good job going back and forth and coming to some agreements. They've also made a commitment for local labor, which is important to our local people here. And we've been out of work for a long time, but now we're working with SUNY projects, and we have an agreement to keep local labor there as well. And I'd just like to hopefully can go forward with this project and keep local 17 skilled labor here working in the backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to make a public comment?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Sam Frado. I'm with the Electricians Union, Local 363, and I also would like to echo the first speaker. I think that Wilmerite has switched their gears. I think they've adjusted what they came to the board with originally. I look at this as another opportunity. We've given plenty of not this is an IDA meeting, but we've given plenty of IDA money to people in Ulster County who have not even wanted to look at the local people when they built their project. One of them was right up the street, Woodland Ponds. Woodland Ponds, I know they had illegals there, and they had people from 8 states there, when I know I had 350 local electricians out of work at that time when they built it. And it really, really hurt, especially when they got about $90 million with the pilot. I'm standing here right now asking that you look at the Wilmerite project in a positive light. And as the business manager of the Electricians Union, I can tell you that I'm looking for opportunities to reach back into the local high schools, which definitely includes New Paltz Central School District and their high school, and get these kids that are not going to college, because there's more and more of them, especially with the cost of college and with the reality that people are graduating college and they're getting a degree in X and there's no job for X. So I'm willing to, this summer, I'm planning on bringing, my goal is 100. I'm hoping more, to bring 100 new people into Local 363 from Ulster, from Orange, from Sullivan. This is not any casino thing. And I want to add the Wilmerite project to that list. I have right now a generated database of non-union electricians that are in Ulster County, in Orange County, in Rockland County, that I'm waiting to bring into the union so they can have a health plan and a pension. The Wilmerite project is going to allow us to continue to do that. It's going to help for to build the future for some of these people that might not have that opportunity. People want to go to college and make a good living. It's a little bit of a crapshoot today, and the trades are a viable alternative for young people. So this is a project that I've seen Ulster County support many projects in my 30 years as a business agent, and I'm hoping to God that you guys will also support this project. These guys came to town, and they're going to use local people. So, again, I support that project, and I hope that you guys could look at that same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to make a public comment? Okay, Ken.
I'd just like to ask a question. I, just prior to,
Can you announce his name?
Just a minute. That's Ken Wishnick is our legislative rep.
But we need a name for the camera.
Can you just state your name for the camera?
Ken Wishnick,
Okay.
Town of New Paltz resident. At the end of the business day today, I called over to the IDA office in Kingston and asked whether there have been any revisions to the original IDA application for pilot and other incentives from the time it was submitted. The answer was no. No amendments were received. The original application does not offer to use local workers on the project. And so certainly I need to ask the question, where's the commitment to use local labor coming from if it's not in any formal submitted application?
Thank you.
My name is Mike Ham. I'm the business agent for Local 825, the Heavy Equipment Operators Union in Ulster County, up in this end. It's been a long winter, and I know our members, just like everybody else, we're hungry and we're waiting to get back to work. We feel as though this project, and we do have a commitment from Wilton Wright, okay, to move ahead with this project with local labor. And we feel as though this project is environmentally sound, okay? It's going to clean up a contaminated site. It's going to give much needed housing to the students of New Paltz College. And it'll also put this piece of property back on the tax rolls. And not to sound redundant, we could beat a dead horse. Everybody knows the issues, okay? Local labor, we need the jobs, okay? We're behind the project. We feel as though it was a great compromise between the board itself with Wilton Wright to get to the number that they achieved, and that they're proposing. I'm sorry, that they're proposing, and we stand behind the job. The operating engineers, Local 825, supports Wilton Wright and the Park Point project. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make a public comment?
Yeah, Frank Powell with Plumbers and Steamfitters, also local labor. 1,300 members, retirees, and active members who work out around this area. We're also looking for that project and also have made a commitment to Wilton Wright. I'm finding it hard to see a negative, and I'm hoping the board passes it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a public comment? Okay, so we'll move on to Planning Board administrative discussion. First up, we have the access management proposal. I did send out to the board members a tweak of the proposal for the law. I did get comments back from Tim. And you saw Tim's comments about putting in a buffer between bike paths and sidewalks and the cars. And then Eileen also had comments in on it. At this point, wanted to ask if the board had any additional comments. We can incorporate these comments, I don't see why not, and send it up to the town board for their review. Obviously, it's a local law, so the town board would have to schedule a public hearing on the section of the zoning. And look for a motion to send it to the town board if we don't have any.
Discussion or comments?
What's that? Motion?
It includes the comments.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is incorporate the comments. I'll put in that Tim's comment, and I'll take off and use Eileen's modified one to send to the town board as a recommendation.
I think Tim's comments were in the one that I used, I think, were they not?
No, they were not.
They didn't
No.
end up in there, okay. so
I just
then-
sent an email responding to a particular section saying, let's include some language along those lines
Where possible.
where
Yeah.
possible, right?
Yeah. And we can incorporate that in there. And so I'll take the 2 comments, we'll clean that up, we'll send it up to the town board, we'll copy everybody on it. As you know, it still has to go before the town and for a public hearing on it, so we can comment again on it at that location. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a look at the finding statement. George get his papers together and start the discussion.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because then I'll eavesdrop on you.
Mr. Chairman, there was one question regarding the impact of the finding statement that I think might be best discussed in executive session for attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
We could have 10 minutes. I'd like to address that point.
Well, we've got to get back here, and then we can have that discussion, and then we'll come back out. I was going to say, it's not in my car.
It's organized, okay. Keep talking.
Keep talking.
Amongst ourselves, right? So Mike, what are we planning on going through whatever outstanding issues are?
Basically, what I want to try to go through, and we've gotten a lot of comments back on cleaning up wording and things of that sort. What I'm trying to get is in each of the sections where we have outstanding issues to really have a discussion about those and settle in on those things, such that we've reached a conclusion on those. And really go through the report section, rather than page by page, section by section, and have that discussion. But I can I wasn't confident in the ability of the Wi-Fi here, so I put it on the stick.
Oh, you put on the book, okay.
So,
I figured I'd eavesdrop on you. So I went
Okay.
through it all this morning.
so, I have a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Excuse me, can you frame that with wording under the open meetings law, please?
For the purpose of the attorney-client privilege.
Okay, which is...
Discussing matters privileged pursuant to the attorney-client privilege.
Thank you.
Okay,
So we should go,
let's go into the,
The assessor's office.
yep. We expect probably, what, 10 minutes? 10 minutes. So,
Famous last words.
and I'll do my best to try to keep the lawyer to 10 minutes.
The lawyer will do his best.
brought some raisins and I ate them on the way over. I was like, just need something sweet. Yeah, they don't.
One at a time.
Okay, wait a minute, this is like a movable,
Yeah,
gotta get the right, to all slide in together.
yeah. Okay, group therapy. Okay, have a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. All right, we're going to be reviewing the finding statement, as I indicated before, and the first section I'd like to review is Section K, which is well down in the document. I'll get to that.
I'm gonna look at the one with you then.
You got yours?
Yeah.
45. It's on page 45. Community services. Basically, this is a revision that George had sent out to you. Do we have any comments on it? I will summarize, or well, one of us will summarize what we have in the,
You want me to give an overview?
sure.
Basically, what Section K does is look at the impact on several community services, starting with police protection, including fire, police, ambulance, water, and sewer. And it then concludes with an evaluation of the application. Has it's been amended through the course of the process. As you will recall, we did a DIS. The scoping outline was prepared in November, I think, of 2011. The document was submitted in 2012. It was finally accepted on September 5th. The IDA amended its UTEP to include the Category 5 pilot on September 6th. The result is the DIS did not include discussion of that specific category of pilot, which is the one that the applicant applied for on February 5th, 2012, which coincidentally was 5 days after the close of the public hearing on the DIS. So the applicant has proposed an application and a pilot to implement that. The fiscal impact of that was considered by the applicant's consultant. There were discussions during the DIS process, and there was a peer review by CGR, which looked at the conclusions and the methodology and had some different conclusions that it drew from the evidence that was presented. The applicant then included those documents in a draft FEIS, which was considered and eventually accepted by the planning board in October of 2012. There were public hearings on that because the document included the fiscal analysis, and it included the peer review as well as the water supply report. So those public hearings concluded in January of this year. There has been some modifications of the project after the public hearing. The board's record also includes the public hearing by the IDA that was held on the proposed application. The board is considering the impact of the application with the proposed pilot. It also, in this document, is looking at the other two categories, Category 5, based on the unit count and based on the fee per unit that would be paid by the applicant. In considering all of those, there are structural problems with the organization of the Category 5. Basically, it distributes whatever amount of money is raised according to the pro rata tax shares of each taxing jurisdiction. So as the IDA noted, most of the money would go to the school district, the school district is providing a modest amount of service. I believe there's 6 children that will be generated by the project. There may be additional children who would be generated by infill housing. But the school district share is fairly significant at 63%. The problem is that there is also a significant amount of police services that are required, and the amount of service required is not commensurate with the allocation of monies to the town to pay for those services. So the Section K analyzes in some detail those different scenarios in which a pilot could be issued, and I've attempted to outline the problems with which each of those pilot payments. I've also looked at the mitigation plan that was proposed by the applicant. The applicant's representative appeared at the February 27th town board meeting. In a series of emails, he elaborated upon the proposal to provide for a mitigation fee. There are some issues with that proposal as far as its structure and the authority of the IDA to vary it, as well as its dependence upon an assessment for the project that is not what the assessor has estimated it would be. So it does not appear to be a feasible mitigation plan as it is proposed. And that's what Section K discusses in excruciating detail.
The question I have with what you just said has to do with 6 students as a result of this project being added to our school district, because that's not my understanding of what is discussed in the finding statement.
It's not what's in the finding statement, but it is what was outlined in the FEIS based upon, and it's limited only to, and it only considered in the finding statement, the potential generation of students from the faculty housing portion of the project.
Right.
What we have discussed at the last meeting is the potential for vacancies in the village to be created that would then be converted into family units and then create additional student impacts upon the school district. The applicant has proposed a methodology for explaining that. There is a 10% allocation of students to the town and village region, and even at 10%, when you include the dormitory, that's 75 vacancies that we all agree are likely as a consequence of the project. And those 75 vacancies, although they're individual student units, some portion of those can be assumed to be likely to be converted over the term of this project. The difficulty is we have to look at a 25-year pilot and contemplate the kind of impacts that will result over that term. That is somewhat difficult to do, and it's somewhat difficult to anticipate how that could be
Right,
made.
I think it's just very important to note that that 10% number that was offered by the applicant's consultant.
Yep.
I don't know anyone who can make sense of that number or where it came from or why it exists, and I'm just troubled by that number along with so many of the other assertions that the applicant's consultant has shared with us to try to make the case that this project would provide significant financial advantage for our community. And I think this is another troubling number. So, I understand that we're using it as our baseline.
Baseline, correct.
But I think it's important for, anyone trying to pay attention that that number does not really resonate with common sense as far as I'm concerned.
Okay,
That for the record.
any other comments on it? No. No. I think for the audience that has absolutely no idea what we're reading here, and most people out there, I'm just going to highlight what basically the impact on community services is on the impact on the town and school districts and taxing jurisdiction associated with the pilot. and we summarize in one paragraph, for these reasons, the planning board finds that if a Category 5 dormitory project pilot is granted for the project, the land use approvals for this project must be denied, as the significant adverse fiscal impacts of unreimbursed costs will result in adverse impacts on the community services, and the resulting impairment of community services will affect the character of the town and the village communities in significant and adverse ways. And so the section K goes into numbers of pages of how we come up with this, but the planning board feels that if a Category 5 dormitory pilot is granted for the project, the land use approvals would have to be denied because of the significant fiscal impacts on it. Any other comments on section K?
Well, just to bring out the fact that one of the impacts of the pilot would be extend beyond the duration of the pilot, the effect on the tax base for the school taxes forever. I don't know the proper terms for it, but it's sort of like the master list upon which your taxes are generated won't include the value of the project and never will, even after the pilot is over with. And so when you're talking about taxes as a percentage of what is taxable, that percentage of what is taxable stays impaired. And just to try to calculate the dollars and cents of that is very difficult because of the difficulty of predicting all of the future things that could conceivably happen to the town. But anything that is just kind of a permanent thing beyond, there's a 46-year lease, there's a 25-year pilot. These things have foreseeable ends, but that one doesn't. So that.
Yeah, I think what Lynn is referring to is the way the tax cap legislation was structured 2 years ago, that it doesn't take into account for this multiplier called the tax base growth factor. It does not get readjusted at the end of a pilot's life. So whether it's a 10-year pilot, a 20-year, 25-year pilot, that is something that has not been mitigated by the state legislature. So that is one of several headwinds that makes the consequences of a pilot and their negative impacts to our community and how they cannot be mitigated.
Right. And if I may, the board is familiar with the Camoin memorandum that was done on March 12th for the Saratoga County IDA, which discusses those specific impacts and leads to the conclusion that with this effect, it's natural to assume that school districts and municipalities may hold required support for pilot agreements because of the impact upon the tax cap. And that can be found online for any interested members of the audience.
Okay. What I'd like to do for the board members is the finding statement's a 90-page document. It covers all the areas that our environmental impact addresses. And the board has had copies of this and sections of it and have reviewed it over the last number of weeks, to say the least. So I will be going through each of the sections and just seeing if we have any outstanding issues. I know in a couple we have to straighten out, so what I'm going to do is quickly go through each of the areas, and if we have something in there that you want to note, as long as it's not editorial or spelling errors and things of that sort, you can give me those in the background on it. First up is soils. We go into existing conditions and proposed mitigations. Were there any comments on the soil section?
I think the only thing was what we already talked about with monitoring.
Yes. Well, out of this, then you would then take and draw up what the
Yeah.
remonitoring requirements are.
Yeah, that's all good.
Section B is geology. It's rather a brief section. Section C is topology. Again, rather brief section. Surface water. And groundwater are the next two areas, somewhat similar. Terrestrial and aquatic ecology. Air quality.
I mean, just a simple question for you, Dave. The only thing that I noticed on the air quality relative to construction was dust mitigation and wetting it down. Are there other things that should be included in there in terms of applications of things besides water, calcium chloride? Is that
I think
what
the
it's done?
idling trucks is one
Yeah,
of the,
no, right,
one of
but,
the issues.
yeah.
I think that was
And
pretty.
the idling didn't say, they gave no time, it said sort of like, best practices, but
Yeah.
dust mitigation. And then on page 24, it said something in accordance with applicable standards, but I didn't know what the applicable standards were. It didn't seem to be identified.
I believe there's a state standard on the idling practices.
Should we not spell those out, or no, we don't need to just reference them?
We can, but I think it's going to be on the site plan. It's going to be a note on
Okay,
the site
great.
plan also.
Okay, and then any kind of tracking and everything be site plan issue?
Yes.
And a quick thing with that, just about the aerial spraying. It just says the nature of the orchard use on adjacent lands is such that the use of aerial spraying by aircraft will not occur. I mean, what if that changes in the future? I guess how will the applicant ensure that the residents aren't just being sprayed with pesticides? I mean, it seems
I
like.
think, is there not a statement in there that, that this is going to be evaluated by a town expert? And I think, Dave, were you in on this one too, on this? And then,
I talked about like,
Are you
I think it
talking about
was.
spraying
on the
outside of the area?
adjacent- Yeah, adjacent lands.
On
Yeah.
adjacent lands?
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
talks about
that's-
spraying by tractor may occur, but it's subject to regulation. But,
Right.
I don't know, it just seems like it'd be a good thing to have in there that, just in case they decide to spray via aircraft, there will be some, I don't know how these things work, but procedures put in place so that the 700 students aren't just getting that all.
What would be spraying, though, that's relative to this application?
I'm just
though?
saying it's in there.
Yeah.
It just seems like.
Because like Right to Farm probably allows the neighboring farmer to do what they need to do.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Right?
well, it says spraying by tractor may occur, but it's subject to regulations.
Yeah,
The way
right.
that is framed makes it seem like spraying by aircraft is not subject to regulation, but it's not.
I think
No,
so.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It just seemed a little loose, that's all I'm saying, but, okay.
I make a point of order to, respectfully, we can't hear you at all. I think
Okay.
if you-
All right, we'll try to
Maybe raise your voice just a little bit. You really can't hear anybody yet, so far. This is me, forgive me.
Okay, last thing with this. I think we might have brought this up before, but I don't have the page numbers, but line 40, I don't know what page. It talks about, no impacts on air quality have been identified or anticipated. That seems weird, because, oh, is this an old one? That we
That's
deleted
not the
that
right,
maybe? Okay.
that's not the right, she's on the wrong document, wait.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an old
Air
one.
quality, really?
Well, no, it's a different date.
Oh,
Look at the
okay.
date, right?
But did we change that line?
I don't know, because we have it numbered differently, that's the only
Oh.
reason why I
All
knew
right,
it
well,
was
I'll look it up
different.
and we'll look at it later.
Yeah, just, Mike, what's the date on this one on the bottom?
4/7.
It was in 3/23 and then 4/7. So, in terms of,
Oh, okay. But,
it might be the same.
but like this source says,
Okay.
no
Okay.
impacts on air quality have been identified or anticipated.
For site occupancy. I think all of this is, all of
Oh,
these
for site
are, those are
occupancy.
all,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's
All
right to the site
Great,
occupancy.
thanks.
Okay, that's what we want.
Working through all the things.
Agricultural resources, Section H.
We've been over that. I think it's fine.
Transportation.
I had a question in this for, there's something referenced in here relative to a conceptual map, Dave. Is that something you've prepared relative to the intersection and future road?
I think it was a
South
map
Hut.
that was prepared by the applicant. You're talking about the connector.
To
piece.
South Putt?
That was something that was done 95 or 96. or something
Okay,
like that.
did you do that? Because I think it says Dave. Okay, so I'm just wondering what a conceptual map, what's the teeth behind that, a conceptual map? Maybe this is more, George, your question in terms of, you know, if we're lining up intersections and future roadway
Right.
possibilities, should there be something more than a conceptual map?
No, I think that works fine for these kind of projects where there is a state agency and the town working together to review any significant project on either side that requires access and a permit. So if the map shows that a conceptual plan has been designed, we would typically make
Okay.
reference to it and to the author, and the permitting agencies would typically review that map to determine that what is proposed is consistent with the concept plan for access to the property.
Okay,
Someone might, for example, move that access for a reason,
understood.
and that might be approved, but it's sufficient, I believe, to put something on the site plan and have it available at the town to show where we anticipate. Basically, it's making sure there is a way to get access to it.
Understood. I'm just wondering what the, you know, the mechanism to make that happen, though, I didn't, that sounds, the reference was a map that Dave said, I don't think it had your last name, or maybe it had initials, and maybe it should be dated and, you know, so that somebody can go, okay, that's the map we're talking about, because I didn't know.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if it was something you just prepared, or it was something, I knew this was discussed a long time ago, but there was no real reference to it, so it should be referenced as,
Back in the late 90s, and that was
Yeah.
before the land use and transportation plan. They looked at that at the time and came up with a finding on that particular route.
okay.
All right, we'll pull that up and cite that in
Okay.
there.
And then there were two, on page 34, Mike, there were two things, and I didn't know if these are in or out, relative to student participation.
Yeah, we'll back, okay. Yep,
Those are, okay, so those are included, or,
what'd you, when we had the red in there, George, I thought you wanted to bring it up for
discussion?
discussion.
The points I wanted to discuss are, there's one under UCAT.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on 17. Let's do this one first, 17, 15, 17, 19. We talk about education of the residents and about restrictions on parking, vehicle use, and participate in programs to implement progressive methods of bike, and we're looking for some sort of student membership on this committee. That's,
If there's a committee formed, it should probably include a student, is that really, I think, the point that was raised by myself and/or Augusta. Right? Yeah, I think that's...
so we could put in the applicant should further work with the student.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the place
Population.
for it, it just, you know, that's where we, but,
Do we know if there is a campus counterpart or someone who serves that function, like the way the bike ped committee works? I understand that's town and village,
Right.
and maybe it should be, I thought it had some relationship with the college.
I think this section that talks about setting up to discuss alternate options to vehicular use and forming a committee. So the only comment here is that there probably should be a student in on that committee.
Okay.
I think it was relative to that, so I think it was something pretty simple. Is if they're forming a committee, they should have a student rep on it.
Okay, so we'll do that, that will cover
At one point, I had asked, here we have the plan for how everything merges into the college, but do we have any kind of timetable or assurances that the college will take care of coming up to the project's edge to meet it?
There is a
discussed that,
representation in a letter from the college presidents that they would construct the improvements on the college to provide access to the property. There is a,
In a timely fashion?
it was implicit. I mean, it's for the purpose of providing access. When
Right.
students-
Yeah.
The applicant will ensure that is being done. They
So
have an
it's-
interest.
The college will do it, and the applicant is going to, I mean, is the applicant paying for that?
The-
George, or no?
Between the applicant, the owner of the Goshawk entity that owns the property, and the college as to how that's going to be worked out, but it's going to be a condition of any approval that that be established and be available to students before the units are
Prior
occupied.
to something, CO,
Well-
prior to TCO,
Like
something.
a CO.
Okay.
Before any
Yeah.
CO would be
Yeah.
issued for
Okay.
occupancy, that would have to be available.
Okay? All right, George, you want to just, since you got a few reds in there, you want to walk through on a,
Under UCAT Service D, I'm not sure my pagination follows, but there is, LaGusta has a comment, and I think it's LaGusta. Yes. And I guess my question is, what direction does the board want to give with respect to the issue of the UCAT system?
What line numbers or page numbers are we talking about here?
My document
That's
is
it,
yeah.
1641, but it's section D, UCAT
Uh-huh.
Service.
Yeah,
And the question is public accessibility. UCAT's not available on weekends. And basically, I think Augusta's asking whether it's acceptable to have a system which is not providing access to the property on weekends when there is need for it. And
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the,
how the mechanic,
yeah, the solution for it should be, but I know I've talked about this before, but it seems like we did all this work to minimize parking and to maximize, public transit, and then,
Alternatives.
yeah, alternatives, and then on the weekends, if you decide to not bring a car for all these reasons, it's very hard to get into town. I'm not really sure what we as a board, we discussed some ideas, I feel like, but I don't know. It's just it just feels sad.
well,
it's the existing situation, too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
the
yeah.
situation is sad,
So-
too, yeah.
But
But we
this
don't have
project,
700 students there, but yeah.
right, didn't you, I think one of the stops was dropped because of Park Point.
Yeah.
So then that has a different
That's-
impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so,
Well, again, I think from the UCAP point of view, you got to constantly evaluate the route and the right of participation and seeing where people are coming from and going to
Yeah.
and alternating it as necessary. So I think what we have to strongly suggest is after the project goes into being, that the UCAP come up with a report of how its routes are time-wise.
Yeah.
And we could ask our transportation committee to follow up with them and
It's true. I
Dennis
mean,
Doyle and.
We also have the transportation committee, Gale Galleries committee.
Right.
Said that they were looking for a commitment from the applicant to
Support.
augment these existing services
Yeah, I think in an
to
ideal
support
world.
this additional demand. And it seems like a response from the applicant is, it seems like the transportation committee is still waiting on a response.
Maybe we should have that in here, that,
Yeah.
And I believe the transportation consultant who reviewed our document on behalf of the planning board pointed that out as well. And that was in the draft when we reviewed this section a few weeks ago.
so why wouldn't there be a pro rata share?
Yeah, exactly. Why should
Some,
we have to share all
something
that?
that's apportioned appropriately.
Well, should other landlords who have high percentages of students and perhaps no parking for them also be approached for some kind of support for weekend?
I mean, this
Loop
is
bus?
the furthest out of the village of any student housing, you know. That to me makes it slightly different and the biggest.
Well, and I think it's also, the other thing is it's student housing, so there's some, I don't want to say there's a level of control, but it's a little bit different than a private individual renting a house on a weekend. How are you going to make them take the bus, you know? And whereas there's college students on a college campus and
the bus is
parking.
free.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we certainly, you know, it's certainly something that could be considered in a, you know, a target area, like a certain radius.
Well,
I don't think it's a bad idea, but...
It also has to, you know, the challenge with so many of the assertions made by the applicant's consultant is that we're going to see reduced traffic, but if there's no bus available
Yeah.
for students on the weekend, so you could say that if there are fewer commuters coming to town on a Wednesday morning because they live at Park
site, yeah.
Point, you could make it's reasonable to assume there are fewer commuters, fine. But then on the weekend, when those folks who, because we've increased the ratio of on-campus from off-campus, when they now need to go grocery shopping, how do they access the grocery store?
I mean, this is also something we've been discussing for probably
Yeah, for the whole time.
a year, maybe.
More than that,
and
more than that.
2
But
years.
that- and I-
This is specifically this issue, and there's been no response from the applicant about, any, you know, any sort of mitigation.
But I think that the Gale Gallery's Transportation Committee put the ball in the applicant's court, so she's waiting on a response. And that's exactly what our consultant echoed earlier this year.
You talking about the bike ped?
No, the
No, no.
transportation.
Okay.
Well, we,
What is it, TIC?
well, we put in here that one of the, you know, this should be one of the issues that's pursued with the Transportation Committee. And it could be a condition of result or something, get a dialogue going here.
Yeah.
Language in there that they do have,
Some responsibility,
We'll-
whatever that is.
we'll have regularly scheduled meetings with the Transportation Committee and the college, because again, there's no weekend service for the college either on this.
Right.
That the Park Point and the college be part of that committee to address the issues that are the limitations of UCAT. They're basically putting them on the committee.
Right.
You know, I think the college is on there and they're on there. At least we'll get some dialogue going and find out, because I have no idea what it costs to run them on weekends and when the best time is. I know Sunday
Yeah.
morning wouldn't be a good run.
Well, there may be another alternative, but they need to come up with something.
The UCAT service, I know, has been studied by, Dennis Doyle provided some maps last fall showing the service locations, and I believe the county planning department has information on the level of service, the cost, and things of that nature. It may be generally of interest to from a planning standpoint, to invite the Dennis and the appropriate people to come to a meeting and explain to you how the system works and how it can serve the residents of the town and village better.
Well, that'd be part of the master planning, too. That could be,
Yeah. I remember reading in the memo, I think from UCAT, saying that the loop is pretty much at the maximum level, that it seems to me that it's making it so long that it's almost not feasible. But yeah, that'd be interesting.
All right.
So I notice on the version that I have, it has been written in on, let's see, I can't get everything on the page, line 1769, page 38, under mitigations, further mitigations, in red, it says providing for multiple loop bus routes to run on weekends to serve the project. And I guess from our discussion, some of the wording could be changed in that to involve the applicant in so providing? Do I have a version that nobody else has?
No, well, that's in my version. But the question becomes whether UCAT is going to do it and what they need to do it.
Right.
Now that need can be met.
Yeah.
There is a
Can't make them
baseline
do
that I believe is, the student government pays some share of that.
Yeah,
So students ride at a discount or free rate. So there's a service that's supposed to be provided to students. If the service can't be provided on weekends, it may not be within the province of the applicant to ensure it can be provided. There may be things they can do to facilitate it.
So that line there can't stand as it is.
Well, I think what you're asking the applicant to do is engage with UCAT, engage with the
College.
entities that exist that can determine if service can be expanded.
Yeah, exactly.
And support that to the extent it's reasonable and feasible.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so maybe we can include that language, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, back to George, where are you?
The next comment I have is further down on that page, number 2, paragraph F, number 2. There is a question raised about parking spaces and permits. We had discussion with the applicant. Their practice is not to issue permits for specific spaces. It is to issue permits and require that people parking have permits,
Yep,
but not for
I
specific
think that's
spaces.
better, yeah.
So that will be revised accordingly.
okay.
Okay, I think that's basically it. So I'll make
Okay.
revisions accordingly to the document.
Anybody else have anything on transportation?
Going back up to the site plan, I just go up a little bit more, Michael. So, is this in, or is this not in with red? This is in? Because it's in, yeah, okay. And that's relative to the determination of when reserved parking will be constructed, at whose call?
Right,
Okay, so,
planner determines. Yeah,
board, okay.
Board, that's
Okay.
right. Okay, anything else that on transportation? Bless you. Land use and zoning is section J. We've had that out for a while, so.
Page 41, lines 1934 to 1941. There's discussion of the annexation proposal. I am advised that that was rejected by the village. The applicant has, I received a letter from Mr. Daniels indicating that we're not anticipating pursuing that further, and we can amend that to reflect it's no longer a proposal.
So it doesn't need to be in there,
Could be deleted,
right?
or we could acknowledge it was there, however briefly, the consequence of the village action.
Well, maybe it is a good idea to leave it in as a artifact of the history of the whole proposal.
Yes, the interesting progression of the history.
With the change, though, that you just
Right.
reported.
That you just,
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Okay, we're going to shoot down to,
George, I had a note in here again, just, I think it was in this, no, you can just keep going, you know, about all the reports or anything be dated, you know, whatever report we use, that it's dated, it be
Yes.
dated in here. Okay, great.
visual resources. We did talk about this and
This is
where the
what the-
location of view shed, that was,
Right, and this is about dark sky, is this lighting as well, dark sky compliance?
yep. Dark sky recommendations and
Yeah, I think it's
objectives.
called compliance, but it's okay.
Okay. Cultural resources,
Even outside, somewhere on there.
that's half a page. You have anything on that? Noise and odors, and
I think in terms of the noise, I think we talked about the generator. Did we talk about that they should exercise it during a time that's like daytime hours or at a normal time
Yeah,
during the
that
week?
Be a site plan note.
Okay.
And the carbon filters, activated carbon.
Page 74. Are you there yet? No, okay. Energy.
energy.
Okay, so put something in here about, we talk about monitoring energy compliance. But I was just wondering, who's monitoring that? Somewhere in here it says we're gonna be monitoring that. Who's
The,
actually be monitoring that? Is that part of the building official's responsibility, or?
It will be monitored to ensure that the plan is designed to incorporate those measures that are required in order to accomplish what the applicant is representative would accomplish. And then it will be monitored to ensure that building as constructed does in fact, is constructed in accordance with those plans.
Right, but who monitors is what I'm
The
asking.
building department would oversee that. The typical way that would be accomplished is by hiring a design professional who reviews the construction plans, and then certification by the contractors that the plans have been met, and that certification would be typically an architect or engineer
Okay,
licensed.
but should it spell it out in here, and not in that long a fashion, but should it spell out who's monitoring? It says something about monitoring. Yeah, it says something about monitoring, it doesn't say who, so,
The monitoring, I think, is best accomplished by putting it in the developer's agreement,
okay.
because that would not only include the requirement for the monitor, but provision for payment.
Yeah, we talked about last, I think it maybe was when you were here. about
That's what, I know, that's why, yeah, okay.
No, that's,
And then, right, and then George, that goes to the other, about costs for hiring a consultant to, that's the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You have that covered, okay, that's what I think I missed, okay.
That has been done before with the Stop and Shop application. There is a extensive developers agreement, and that included escrow arrangements.
Okay, anything else on noise and odors?
We're on energy now, right?
No, energy.
Yeah.
Okay. Solid waste.
Seems fine.
There was, I will make reference to compostables.
Okay, thank you. Not compost yet. Right, so,
Pre-compost.
right, right.
And last is the phasing.
I just found a little math error on number 2. They're building one faculty housing building with a total of 8 one-bedroom apartment units and 2 two-bedroom apartment units containing a total of, and it says 36 bedrooms, but when you add it up, it's 12.
Right.
So, that's just one
That's why I'm a
little thing.
lawyer, not an engineer.
That's the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
wow, that's a close reading.
No, I always check the math,
That's really great.
just the nuts.
Each of us have unique characteristics that we rely on as a team. Okay.
There is section O, which I had need of revising. It is fairly short, and the revision is
Oh, I haven't even
proposed
looked at
mitigation
this,
measure.
because we didn't have it.
It was distributed, sorry, section Q. It was distributed as a separate document in the individual documents. It was not included in the consolidation because I needed to address the mitigation. And basically, what it does is look at the consistency of the project with the proposed development in the area,
This now?
and then it considers the impact of the project upon community character, which is essentially incorporating the discussion in section K. And then there is proposed mitigation, which
Through
is,
the miracle of internet, I never got to, so I'll look at it. Fine.
So this is basically more of a summary than anything else.
Yeah.
yeah.
Needs to be in
Is the,
this list too.
Okay.
That's where it's missing. It is inside.
would the board just,
I
members?
have a question.
Yeah.
George, the second page, first paragraph, we say surveys of existing rental rates for student housing and multifamily dwellings suggest a monthly rental is between $500 and $550. Where's that number from?
That was taken from the FEIS. So,
That sounds low.
That sounds very
that's-
low.
That's not New Paltz.
do you have a more accurate number that we should be using?
700, throw that out there.
I think it's generally like $600 to $650 a bedroom.
Yeah, we should qualify what it's for,
Well,
as opposed to
Yeah, like for a
renting a
bedroom.
two-bedroom place versus a,
Well, this says,
Yeah.
multi-family dwellings suggests that the monthly rental, so, you know, you have a range, so,
it's between 500 and
700?
but what's also curious about New Paltz is two-bedrooms, the bedrooms in a two-bedroom are pretty comparable to the bedrooms in an eight-bedroom.
I mean, in terms of rent.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was trying.
How much it would cost to rent a room.
600 to 650?
maybe 500 to...
Why don't we keep a big range since
Yeah.
we're making things up here without any
Yeah.
real factual basis? So I think maybe just put a bigger range, or
Looking
500
at
is
the for rent
unrealistic.
ads,
Actually,
you can
there
get
is
that
a
range.
considerable
What's
amount
that?
of,
Just looking at the for rent ads, you can get,
You can, but we don't have that sitting here right now, so.
no, we don't.
we have people who are familiar with the,
So just
Structure
maybe
of
make a
the
bigger
rental market.
range, though.
Just go on the SUNY
Yeah.
bulletin board right now, pick
Yeah,
the top 10 and
exactly.
take an average.
If we had internet, we could do that.
I got internet.
Okay, well,
Well, before you get on the internet, could you just read over the conclusion, once you get there?
that is the necessary findings that or that's a necessary conclusion of the finding statement required by the Part 617, seeker, Section 12.
George, I'm not comfortable with this discussion in the anticipated impacts. I think we've gone over this before. You know, where you talk about, it is likely that a property with housing that is currently offered as student housing will continue in that use or be offered to individuals seeking such housing. I mean, I'm just
Tim, where
not
are you?
comfortable.
Where are you, Tim?
The second page of Q, community character. I just don't agree with this paragraph.
Which one? You
It's like the middle of the page,
big
right below the
paragraph.
middle, it begins, it is likely that a
Oh.
property with housing.
Second paragraph above, proposed mitigation.
Because then what do we
Because-
do if it...
well, because that's not based on Yeah, we probably all know people that have a house right now that they're using for student housing that just turned into something else. Yeah, so,
There certainly is going to be changes to and from student
Right.
housing regardless of the project. The question is, when there are individual vacancies, what's the likelihood, for example, that a 4-bedroom or 8-bedroom house is going to change because one person left the building? And it may ultimately do that, and that's one of the issues with this.
That seems like a very narrow scenario where it was a 8-bedroom house and then one person moved out.
but that's not what you're saying here anyway, though, George. You're making, that's a better, I think what you just said is a better example of what you're maybe, trying to say here. Because you're basically saying if there's a house that's a student house, it'll continue to be a student house.
Well, it's more likely to, the business model is set up for that purpose. The landlord is familiar with the practice. Presumably, there is some economic incentive to
Keep it that way.
make him do that. He converted it to that use. One assumes that he would continue the use if he is able to. So,
Well, that's the whole question.
If
they're
SUNY
able to.
was increasing the number of students enrolled in the college, I think you could make this argument. But they're keeping the total enrollment the same. So students will move on campus or to Park Point, opening up other properties in the village, which were formerly single-family homes. So the conversion back to a single-family home is a pretty easy switchback. It's not like these were properties that were designed to be student housing that then have to be converted to single families. Like that is the.
you gotta fix the hole in the walls.
Well,
And think-
it
no,
seems like we're not agreeing. Could we just take out
Well,
that
I was going to
paragraph?
say, what's the point of the paragraph?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just speculation, it's likely
Yeah,
that,
that's
It's
what
total
it sounds like.
speculation.
I think if we just eliminate it, we're done.
yeah, let's just take it out.
Okay. Can we get to the conclusion?
Back to
Okay.
Environment, yeah. I don't think that should be here. Can we, maybe?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if this environmental things can be avoided. I don't know if they will be avoided, but they can.
In paragraph 3, the end of the long sentence with many commas, the nature of a Category 5 pilot is such that those adverse impacts cannot be adequately mitigated by the mitigation fee proposed by the applicant. However, aren't we also saying that the nature of a Category 5 pilot is such that adverse impacts cannot be adequately mitigated? To have a pilot at all,
Well, that's why I think we got
Mitigation fee or
two
not,
thoughts,
yeah.
two thoughts in the same sentence.
One's the mitigation fee, one's the.
I,
The planning board finds the request pilot
I
agreement,
don't
if
quite
granted.
understand,
There's, well,
based on what we've been. So is this a way of saying that if a better mitigation fee is offered, it could be considered adequately mitigated?
this is simply saying that what the applicant has proposed as mitigation in this particular circumstance does not mitigate the impact of the requested pilot.
Uh-huh.
And that's for two reasons. The applicant is proposing a pilot that would be determined at the lowest scale on the range of pilot payments, but based on 228 student housing units. The IDA is in the process of considering the definition of the unit, and my understanding is there is a recommendation to the board to adopt the definition of a unit that's one bedroom. So there may be a different circumstance that applies, and the problem is you have an application, you have a proposal, you have mitigation that follows from that proposal, and that mitigation is inadequate for a couple of reasons. One is, if the IDA changes the definition of unit, it must at least approve a pilot which meets that classification, otherwise it's a deviated pilot, and that would require the consent of all the taxing jurisdictions. So it has to consider an application if it changes the definition. It would be 696 times the minimum set forth in the schedule. And that would be different than what the applicant has proposed as mitigation, which is based on a different interpretation of the pilot and a mitigation payment to the town of monies. But the mitigation payment is coming from the allocation of money that would be required under the standard pilot to be given to the school district. So it's transferring the amount of monies from one taxing jurisdiction to the other to make the town whole, but increasing the relative impact on the school district and on the county. And the board has identified impacts that will result for the school district beyond those that were identified by the applicant, and those impacts would not be mitigated by the payment.
Can I suggest that you make it 2 sentences?
Sure.
The planning board finds the requested pilot agreement, if granted, would cause significant adverse financial impacts upon community services, will result in significant adverse environmental impacts on community character and population, period. The nature of Category 5 pilot is such that the adverse impacts cannot be adequately mitigated by the mitigation fee proposed by the applicant. It's a separate thought. We're saying, in the first thought, we're saying the pilot agreement. Okay, what I,
And then with 4, when it goes on with the therefore, it says the planning board finds that if a pilot
yep,
is granted to the project, should we modify this a pilot to specify the pilot that they actually applied for?
No, because
No.
because you
No, it
you
doesn't.
you have not come close to mitigating the impacts to the school district.
The discussion in Section K analyzes the 3 scenarios that I believe are reasonable to assume. One is the applicant's proposal with the application was made. 2 is an application that's based on the minimum pilot payment that's in schedule in Category 5. And 3 is the maximum. And that's assuming that the number of units is increased as the IDA has indicated it would be. Even under that scenario, the maximum payment to all of the taxing jurisdictions is $522,000. The result is the town receives less than the cost that has been identified.
And due to the essential rigidity of the UCIDA and its criteria and categories and everything,
yes.
that's the best they can do.
They cannot do differently unless all of the taxing jurisdictions indicate consent. They determine that they're going to ignore the maximum jurisdictions. In which case they could approve a deviated pilot, but that means that someone is not being made whole.
Then I think we want to keep it if a pilot is granted to the project.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, what I'd like to do is, if the board is comfortable with everything in the finding statement, and allow George to clean it up, Dave to fill in the blanks on what specificity of the things, going forward with it, that we could approve it tonight and allow it to be filed shortly, as quickly as we can get this thing done.
And as fast as.
If the board's comfortable with that. Okay.
Yeah, with the corrections as we've made them.
Okay. It's not to say if anybody wants to read it before it goes, feel free. We can do that, but I just wanted to get the board to vote on it as a
Yeah, I
document.
support voting on it, but I still want to read it before it goes, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the whole, the totality of everything.
That, and again, okay. So for this, I would, anyway, want to propose a motion to accept the finding statement as amended and as discussed at the meeting tonight.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We got to do anything else to this, George?
And this would include the conclusion.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the summary.
That would conclude.
Okay. A motion on the floor, made and seconded to accept the finding statement as amended tonight, and to direct the town attorney, town engineer, to fill in alcohol and fill in the blanks, and to circulate it for any missing pieces for the board.
The other issue that inquiry was made by the applicant as to whether we were considering site plan approval, and I did have discussion with Dave on Friday as to where the site plan stands.
Yeah.
And the site plan is largely complete.
Yep.
As far as a document that you could consider for approval. And the question is whether the board wants to at least have me draft an approval resolution draft an approval resolution for consideration and determination as to whether that would be acceptable in terms of conditions and other requirements. In view of the determination that was made tonight, I'm not sure. I'm basically looking for guidance from the board. There are issues.
Okay, I'd like to take a vote on my finding statement first.
Oh, I'm
There you
sorry.
go.
I thought we did that.
No.
No, we made a motion.
Oh, yeah. We moved and seconded.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Now, what I just said before, I'll say.
So George, I have a question. We haven't looked at the site plan as a board, though, have we? Other than we've received it, we've looked at it in general terms, but we haven't looked at the site plan did I miss that
We've
meeting?
been doing it concurrently.
Well, pieces of it, right,
Right.
but,
Which parts, Eileen, are you?
well, there's some notes on the plan that you were saying that we were gonna be doing, but I guess I was also under the impression that we were gonna go through our FEIS, and then we were gonna take another shot at the site plan, in terms of just evaluating the plan itself. That was,
It may not be inconsistent, because what I would do is draft something which is based on past approvals. Hampton Inn and Stop and Shop come to mind, which are fairly complex, and lay out the standard types of conditions and the requirements for getting the plan signed. Some of the things you'll do are to say, it's generally okay as soon as Dave reviews the stormwater plan and certifies it's
right,
satisfactory, that item can be done. So it's a town engineer requirement. And that may help you as you go forward with the review of the site plan, to understand what's what's necessary to review and what's necessary to set out in condition.
But your question is, should we just put that on hold for now? Is that for now?
No, I think what we want Rick George to work up on a resolution, but I think you want to sit down and bless it one time at a meeting to see if there are any issues that anybody has on any of the things that could come up. You have the FEIS, what we're doing on different areas on it, and a look-see what's on there and to bring up any issues that may be outstanding to move forward on it.
We haven't read this whole thing aloud for the benefit of the,
Would you like me to read it out loud?
I think the people concerned about this would
Like to know what
would like to know what we just voted on.
Okay. And
That was a good idea, Len, but probably could have done it 5 minutes ago.
yeah, I could have. I thought about it, and then I lost track of it. Basically, Section Q is community character. The conclusion of it is, after due consideration and pursuant to Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law and 6 NYCRR Part 617 of the relevant environmental impacts, facts, and conclusions disclosed in the FEIS, and after weighing and balancing the relevant environmental impacts with social, economic, and other considerations, the Planning Board of the Town of New Paltz, as its lead agency, certifies for the reasons set forth in these findings that, consistent with social, economic, and other essential considerations from among the reasonable alternatives, the project itself is one that avoids or minimizes adverse environmental impacts to the maximum extent practical, and that the adverse environmental impacts can be avoided or minimized to the maximum extent practical by incorporating those mitigation measures that set forth herein. As proposed, the project itself appropriately balances the potential adverse environmental impacts of the project with the potential beneficial impact of using the project site, which is presently vacant land, to construct a multifamily residential development that will address the college's desire for additional housing opportunities for existing students, faculty, and staff. 3. However, the applicant has applied for Category 5 pilot from the Ulster County IDA. The Planning Board finds that the requested pilot agreement, if granted, will cause significant adverse fiscal impacts upon community services, which will result in significant adverse environmental impacts on community character and population. That the nature of a Category 5 pilot is such that those adverse impacts cannot be adequately mitigated by the mitigation fee proposed by the applicant. Therefore, the Planning Board finds that if a pilot is granted to the project, the land use approvals must be denied to avoid those significant adverse impacts. The finding statement sets forth the facts and conclusions utilized by the Planning Board to make its decision. And that's what we voted on, document-wise.
Can I say one thing just about just a personal note? I think it was really great to hear from the labor leaders who came here tonight. And I think, just speaking personally, maybe the people on the board agree with me, I think there's nothing I would rather see than to have this project go forward. Wonderful that Wilmette wants to use local labor. I think that's really great. And it was really great to hear from you guys. But, I mean, our job is to see if the fiscal impacts of the project have been mitigated. And it's, you know, just want to put in a little word of support for, thanks for coming, speaking about labor unions. That's wonderful. It'd be great to see the project go forward with union labor. But, well, you heard our statement, so there we go.
Okay, on the second note, then I would ask,
Why didn't you do that with Woodland Pines?
because it's a village.
I wasn't on the board there.
Yeah.
That's in the village.
That's not us.
I would ask George to work up a resolution similar to what we have used on other site plans. I asked Dave to draft up a memo for the board on what issues are on the site plan and how they've been addressed in the past number of months. on it, or what is outstanding, and then to come forward at the next meeting to look at the site plan for issues and questions that anybody has on the site plan. Okay? I'm busy next week. Anything else for the board?
You said next week?
No, I didn't say next week. Augusta will smack me if I say next week.
You won't be here. We'll be here next week. It's the weekend.
A motion, 2 weeks away. Motion to adjourn. Favor? Aye. Okay, sorry to note, I will be on the road for the meeting on the 28th, so we'll be on the road for the meeting in May, both meetings in May. So,
What road are you on?
let's see, I'll be down in Raleigh in April. I'll be out in Northborough, Massachusetts in May, and then, no, it's all work, and then Cooperstown at the end of May.
Okay, great.
Mike, what's the agenda for the 28th?
Oh, about 1,000 things.
So you don't want to switch?
How are you, sir?
Anybody tell me a possible scenario given Wednesday's meeting and the statements that have been made about the county coming
IDA.
first? The idea, yeah.
You know, yeah,
Ball's in their court?
yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, it's in their court. What we generally do with finding statement is we circulate it, right, George? Yeah. We'll circulate it to all the involved agencies and interested agencies. As soon as we clean it up, hopefully we'll get it out shortly. And then they can either adopt it or do their own.
Right.
Do you have a copy of the resolution? I'm sorry.
But to adopt it, if they adopt your statement, we've talked about this.
Yes,
It can't go ahead. They've got to develop.
one would think.
Yes. Okay. Yes. You have a copy of that final,
You can have a copy
Just two little marks that we changed on it.
Still here. Because they never amended anything, they never said anything. So, yeah. Interesting, Ken Wishnick's point, that they never amended, that they never amended anything, they never changed it to their original application, so they never even said they were gonna use it. So they make an agreement without changing any application. They certainly changed our applications quick when we asked them. We got in there.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a
Made the motion to close, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, pick out any two.
Motion, and then he said, she said second, so she thought
Okay, so
he
you
did.
made the motion, you seconded.
Second, yeah, for the close, yeah.
take the record.
No.
But that's true.
Oh, Mike.
How you doing?
Good.
Does that finding statement go online at any point?
It will, as soon as we clean it up.
Okay. Is there any idea when that might happen?
Hopefully by the end of the